101. It's my pleasure to introduce your presenter, Dawn Douglas. Dawn is an authorized Google education trainer, an Aerohive certified wireless professional, and has spent the past 15 years in IT. She is currently serving as a systems administrator for Carolina Friends School and as owner and systems consultant for Pepper Tech. We'll be watching the questions and answers on the website and answering them at the end of the session, so please be sure to upvote any questions you want to have answered. And I will pass it to Dawn.
Thank you, Susan, and welcome to Chromebooks 101. I'm going to start my presentation today by telling you about where Carolina Friends School was in terms of classroom technology at the beginning of the school year in 2012. We had carts of aging MacBooks that, rather than looking like this, had started to look more like this. And it had gotten so bad that teachers were actually reverting to using these. So the Director of Information Technology and myself started to look at what our options were for replacing the MacBooks. We did consider buying MacBooks, PC laptops, tablets, and then we heard about Chromebooks. We very quickly decided that Chromebooks would be a great fit for our institution. The three primary reasons that we decided upon Chromebooks were: one, cost. They cost about 25% of what it would cost us to put a MacBook in a classroom. Two, they are very easy to deploy and manage through the Google Apps for Education Admin Console. Three, they boot in 8 seconds or less, so there is no loss in instructional time waiting for technology. Before we deployed Chromebooks, there were a number of things that we needed to consider. The first thing that I considered was our infrastructure, primarily two pieces of our infrastructure. First was our WAN link. At this time, we had a 15 megabytes per second WAN link. Because we were planning to move from devices that would primarily do their computing locally to devices that would primarily do their processing in the cloud, I knew that there would be a greater load on our WAN link. So I contacted our ISP and upgraded us to a 45 meg per second link. Even now in 2015, with 120 Chromebooks deployed and 450 other technology devices, that link is still more than sufficient. The other piece of our infrastructure that I focused on was our wireless system. We were very fortunate that we had just migrated from a wireless system that was about 5 years old to a wireless system that was comprised of access points that were 2x2 and 3x3 and were running on the N protocol. These devices have been more than sufficient to support our Chromebooks and other devices. The other two things that I focused on were adoption and education. Of course, when you roll out a technology initiative, you want 100% adoption. We have found that the best way to do that is through education. For example, when we rolled out Google Apps for Education in 2011, we did a lot of staff education about the product. We did school-wide training, we did unit-specific training, individual training, we answered lots of help desk calls, and we even did something called lunch bites, where we would do training on a very small Google Apps for Education topic during lunchtime. And because of all this education, we now in 2015 have a 100% adoption rate of Google Apps for Education by all of our staff. We did something similar when we deployed our Chromebooks. And as a matter of fact, in just a couple minutes, I'm going to show you a 3-minute video where 2 of our middle school teachers are talking about their experience as participants in the middle school Chromebook pilot program. The last thing that we considered before we purchased our Chromebooks was scalability. And what I really mean by scalability is how are you going to deploy these devices? Will you do it school-wide? Will it be a one-to-one initiative? Will you do it perhaps a card at a time or unit by unit? Whatever deployment method you choose, be sure to have the appropriate personnel in place to reduce frustration by staff when they are learning something new and have a question. So now I'm going to show you this 3-minute video from Jim Rose and Ida Trizzolini, who are 2 of the middle school teachers that participated in our Chromebook pilot program.
We thought it was important not to just dump the Chromebooks into the laps of our teachers or immediately give every student a Chromebook. We really wanted to do this more thoughtfully, so instead we chose a few teachers who we thought would jump right into using them, who already were really comfortable with all sorts of technology and would be able to effectively integrate the Chromebooks into what they were doing in the classroom already. So we gave each of them a classroom set, enough Chromebooks that every student had one whenever they wanted one. And we gave the teachers complete control over how they used the Chromebooks. We did, though, make it an action research project. In other words, each of us had to settle on something to investigate. And in my case, as a science teacher, I chose to compare different ways of keeping a science journal, the traditional hardbound or paper-bound, but handwritten, hand-drawn version versus something online. And what I did was I told the kids who chose to do the online version, all right, you have to make a sketch or you have to write a description. You've got to make a graph, whatever. I didn't tell them how to do it. I just let them figure it out, and it worked really well. The teachers doing this project met weekly about what worked and what didn't, share our successes and our difficulties. We shared our documents through Google Apps for Education, so we had the same experience that our kids were having. We looked at it from their point of view. We kept notes, we documented our experience, and in the end, we reported back to the whole staff.
We were doing action research as a staff on these. Action research involves figuring out what your question is, testing it, looking at your results, and then tweaking your question, and then it's basically what we do as teachers all the time anyway, in terms of developing curriculum. So I had the kids help design what did they want to test. Some kids were testing specific apps. The 2 girls wanted to find, are there apps that we can use on the Chromebooks that would help make our math class more fun and interesting and help us practice the facts that are hard to learn. 2 of the boys wanted to look at presentation software. Can we use Prezi on the Chromebooks? Is the Google presentation tool just as good as PowerPoint? Will we be losing anything if you're trying to do slideshows on the Chromebooks? As a class, we were looking about using Google Docs instead of Word because, of course, on the Chromebooks, since they're all web-based, there is no Microsoft Word. And so different kids chose specific areas that they wanted to study and then spent the class period testing and researching. And once they found their answer, going, okay, well, here are these, but will we really use them? And going back and back to them. And then at the end of the course, each small team had to prepare a presentation to share with the middle school faculty about what they had learned about the Chromebooks, whether or not they felt that they were useful in class, and whether they recommend that we purchase them as a school.
So at this point, you may be wondering how to purchase Chromebooks for your school. If you remember nothing else about how to purchase Chromebooks, remember that you must purchase them through an authorized reseller. The reason that you have to purchase them that way is that is the only way to obtain a management license for the Chromebooks. And the reason that you need a license is that this gives you the ability to manage your Chromebooks through the Google Apps for Education Management Console. Now, to deploy your Chromebooks, and I kid you not when I say this, it will take you more time to unbox them and inventory them than it will to deploy them. So once you have them unboxed and inventoried, you boot them up, you press Control plus Alt plus E at that first login. Log in with a domain admin from your Google Apps for Education domain. And then somewhere between 2 minutes and 24 hours later, those policies will be pushed to your Chromebooks and they will be ready to go. It's really a breeze. You may think that because the Chromebooks cost so much less than a traditional laptop, that you wouldn't get all of the ports that you would get with a traditional laptop. But as you can see from this diagram, that is not the case. You do get a high resolution video port, USB ports. This diagram is a little bit older. I imagine by now that they are coming with USB 3 ports, a multi-card slot, and of course, an Ethernet port and a headphone jack. Logging in on a Chromebook is slightly different than a traditional laptop. We did have to educate our staff and students that they would need to utilize their Google Apps for Education email address and password rather than just using their computer username. In addition, the keyboard on a Chromebook is typically different than what you see on a traditional laptop. In this picture, you can see that in the top row, you do not have function keys. Also, on the left-hand side of your screen, where you would see a caps lock key, you have a search key instead. So how do you access functionality such as turning on caps lock? You use keyboard shortcuts. In the case of turning on caps lock, you use the keyboard shortcut Alt plus the search key. To take a screenshot, you use the keyboard combination Control plus F5. Printing from Chromebooks is also slightly different than with traditional laptops. Because you can't install traditional software on a Chromebook, you cannot install print drivers. So that with a Chromebook, to be able to print, you have to utilize something called Google Cloud Print. And you can do that in 2 ways. The first way is to buy a Google Cloud Print Ready printer. And I have a list of those in the class materials folder. Or you can install Google Cloud Print Services on your Windows Print server and use traditional printers, and your Chromebooks will be able to print to those just fine as long as you have that service running on your print server. One thing to know about printing from Chromebooks is that they will be a little bit slower than printing from a MacBook or PC laptop because the print job is going out to the Google Cloud Print Service and then coming back to your network. So that is just something to educate your staff and students about. That actually concludes the slide portion of my presentation. Now I'd like to spend a couple of minutes and show you some key pieces of the admin panel for managing your Chromebooks. So under device management, you would click. Oops, let me go back here to the home screen. I apologize. So from the home screen, click on Apps, Additional Google Services, Chrome Management, and you can manage your Chromebooks on two levels. There's the user level and there's the device level. Let's take a look at some device policies first. Give me just a minute. Okay, we will start with user settings. So at the user level, we've turned a few things on here, but what I really want to point out to you is how we push out apps to our users. If you go down to the setting that's labeled Force Installed Apps and Extensions, and then click on Manage Force Installed Apps and Extensions. And by the way, let me just take a minute and speak to the difference between an app and an extension. An app is very simply a shortcut to a website. The users will access it through the app launcher, which is in the bottom left-hand corner of their Chromebook desktop. An extension is something that operates in the context of the Chrome browser, and that will appear in the upper right-hand corner to the right of the address bar. And an extension, rather than being a shortcut to a website, is actually a small program that can operate on multiple websites. So you can see in this screen that we have decided to push out 22 apps and extensions to our students. If I wanted to push out an additional app or extension, what I would do is click on Chrome Web Store. And for this example, I'm going to look for an app called Powtoon, which is a great app for making cartoons. I've actually used it to do a little tutorial on troubleshooting wireless on MacBooks. I'll press enter to get my results. To add Powtoon, I would click on add here. You see now that there are 23 apps that will be pushed to users. If I actually wanted to save this change, I would click save right here. And the next time that the policies were refreshed, all users would get Powtoon. Since this is just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to press cancel. Something else to note with policies is that they are applied at the organizational unit level. You'll notice that over on the left-hand side, we have all these organizational units, which are called OUs. And right now, I'm pushing out policies to the top of our organization. So everybody in every one of these OUs would get the policies. If I just wanted to apply policies, say to our test OU, I would click test, and then I would set the policies at that level. Now I go back to Chrome Management, click on Device Settings, and there are two things that I want to call your attention to here. The first is forced re-enrollment. It is rare, but sometimes devices will unenroll themselves from the domain, or we will need to reset a device to factory defaults. With this turned on, as soon as the device is operational, or if it has unenrolled itself from our domain, the next time that the policy is pushed out to that device, it will re-enroll itself in the domain. So that is a great policy to configure that way. The other thing that I want to call to your attention is sign-in restriction. You'll notice that we have this enabled, and we only allow people who have a Google Apps for Education email address that belongs to either our student domain or our staff domain. Those are the only two domains that are allowed to sign into our Chromebooks. That concludes my demonstration portion of my presentation. Are there any questions?
So Don, I think you did such a great job of explaining it. I'm not seeing any questions in our feed.
Okay, well, if that's the case, let me talk about one thing that did happen to us and that you may find helpful to know for your institution, is that when we first started with Chromebooks, we had a really interesting thing happen. We were having construction occur, not on our campus, but on the main road that led to our campus, and a bulldozer actually bulldozed our fiber connections.
Oh gosh.
We did not have internet access for about 24 hours. Our teachers are very accustomed to having a plan, not only a plan A, but a plan B and a plan C. So they really did take it all in stride. But it's definitely something to consider because these are cloud devices that when your internet goes down, unless you're in a one-to-one deployment and can use offline mode, your teachers really do need to have a plan B and a plan C. Are there still no questions?
Well, Michael here said, I wanted to take it all in. I didn't want to stop note-taking for comments. Great presentation. So you did do a fabulous job explaining everything.
Thank you, Michael.
Other than that, unless, I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Okay. If there are no questions, I'm going to conclude my presentation. Thank you, Susan, for your assistance, and thank you, everyone, for attending.